Euranet Plus Panorama is a weekly review of European news broadcast by our network of EU radio stations.
Hi there, I'm Jo and you're listening to Euranet Plus Panorama. The EU-Mercosur Partnership Agreement has entered a state of legal limbo following a challenge by the European Parliament. The agreement with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, which was officially signed on the 17th of January in Asunción, but originally concluded in December 2024 after 2.5 decades of negotiations, is controversially made up of two distinct parts. The first part is a comprehensive agreement covering political dialogue, cooperation and trade, which needs to be approved by the European Parliament and ratified by member states. The second is a more immediately applicable interim trade agreement, as Arve Shank-Lucas, head of the Commission representation in Estonia, tells Kuku Radio.
There are actually two agreements. One is a broader partnership agreement, which must also be ratified by the parliaments of the member states. In this sense, it is a very inclusive agreement, as we are asking for everyone's opinion, and no one is being left out. The other is purely a trade agreement. The EU has exclusive competence in trade matters. We can negotiate them on behalf of member states, and this part could therefore enter into force in advance.
Far from being celebrated as a big win for the Commission, though, the finalisation of the long-awaited agreement has only served to expose deep political divisions within the bloc. Divisions at all levels, within member states, between member states, and even between EU institutions. On the 21st of January, the European Parliament voted by a narrow margin to refer the deal to the European Court of Justice for an opinion on its legality under the EU treaties. MEPs are primarily concerned that this splitting of the agreement into two parts is an attempt to bypass parliamentary scrutiny at both EU and national level. While the legal review is underway, a process that could take up to 2 years, the EU is unable to formally ratify either part of the agreement. The question is whether the Commission will try to provisionally apply the interim trade deal in the meantime, something that is legally possible under the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU, and which Brussels has done for a number of other agreements. The answer to this question is far from clear, as can be gleaned from Shank-Lucas's comments.
We are currently in very close contact with both member states and the Parliament to find a way to move forward and proceed with ratification as quickly as possible. These consultations are ongoing, so we cannot give a clear final answer at this stage.
With the Council of the EU having approved by qualified majority the signing of the agreement last month, should it decide to greenlight the provisional application of the trade agreement, this could happen a couple of months from now, as soon as the first Mercosur country ratifies it. Such a move would, though, be extremely controversial. First and foremost, it could cause a major political rift between the European Parliament and the other two main EU institutions. Any sidelining of the Parliament could also be seen as undemocratic, as the Brussels executive imposing its will on Europe's citizens. Moreover, given that the trade agreement's very existence is legally questionable, having been referred to the European Court of Justice, what happens if the court deems it to have violated the EU treaties? Then, at a national level, it goes without saying that several member states would be up in arms. France is probably the deal's most vocal opponent, citing environmental concerns, primarily deforestation-related, and the potential impact on Europe's farming sector. Austria, Hungary, Ireland and Poland echo these concerns. There are also plenty of dissenting voices in member states more favourably inclined towards the deal. One such voice belongs to Jorge Pisco, president of the Portuguese Confederation of Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. In an interview with Renascença, Pisco warns of the risks of agricultural and agri-food production being abandoned by family farms and small producers as a result of competition from South American imports. Indeed, he fears that the benefits of the EU-Mercosur agreement will not reach small businesses full stop.
We believe that the EU-Mercosur agreement is designed to serve the interests of large companies. notably in the agribusiness, industry and service sectors. This means that the benefits are not automatically accessible to small and medium-sized enterprises, nor are they distributed in a balanced way, because in most cases, exports by micro and small enterprises are carried out through intermediaries, which in this specific case significantly reduces the likelihood of any gains from the agreement reaching small businesses.
And Jan Jonker, Professor of International Trade at Spain's OBS Business School, outlines the environmental issue in an interview with Es Radio Castilla y León.
What happens if the agreement is implemented and, as a consequence, the Brazilians start cutting down more trees, deforesting, and then start introducing more pesticides and so on into other products, which runs completely counter to the premise of the EU's Green Deal?
The agreement does include legally binding commitments in an attempt to ensure that Mercosur countries halt deforestation and align with the Paris Agreement, though many NGOs argue that these are insufficient. Despite such concerns and ongoing protests by their own farmers, Portugal, Spain, Italy and Germany are in favour of going ahead. They cite the need for new markets for European goods, geopolitical alternatives to China and the US, and access to raw materials. Jan Jonker, who we just heard from, stresses that although the agricultural sector has long been of great importance in Europe, and the EU must of course safeguard its farmers, it should not be allowed to monopolise the political and public discourse.
We are talking here about something, agriculture, that represents between 3 and 5% of the global treaty, and in fact, beef only accounts for 1.5%. So we are talking about blocking a very large, important contract for just 1.53% of the value of the treaty. This should not be the case.
With his feet firmly in the pro-Mercosur camp, Vilnius University economist Algirdas Bartkus gives Žinių Radijas one reason why the Lithuanian government should rethink its current negative stance on the agreement. In a word, exports.
Mercosur is important so that we can try to distribute our products there. The Germans have one intention. Industrialists in France, who are also in favor of this agreement, have another. Certain of our engineering industries in Lithuania, for example, biotechnology, lasers, electronics, already have a good reputation. But one thing that is needed now is to actively break into the supply channels in those countries.
On the other side of the coin, Indrė Genytė-Pikčienė, chief economist at Lithuania's Artea Bank, notes that these agreements are vital for diversifying Europe's import sources.
There are indeed many sensitive issues related to agriculture, but the main and fundamental benefit of these agreements lies in the diversification of import channels. This means the ability to establish closer ties with countries rich in rare earths and the many other resources that Europe does not itself possess. The market for these resources is currently entirely dependent on China. The desire to diversify our import options is therefore strategically sound, and these agreements are aimed precisely at strengthening our strategic autonomy in this way.
It was actually Italy's green light in the Council that ultimately tipped the balance in favour of approving the 17th of January signing. Our colleagues at Radio 24 share Italian PM Giorgia Meloni's take on the situation.
I commend the work Italy has done to make the agreement more balanced. We believed that the agreement was unbalanced, especially in certain sectors such as agriculture. We worked closely with the Commission. Thanks to the willingness of the Commission, but also that of our partners, we achieved some very important changes to reassure a fundamental asset of the European economy, namely agriculture. At that point, the agreement became more balanced and Italy gave the green light.
Che per l'appunto l'agricoltura, a quel punto per noi l'accordo è diventato equilibrato e come sapete l'Italia ha dato il via libera.
Yet some of the concessions Rome extracted in order to provide the qualified majority required in the Council are controversial in their own right. These include securing a pledge from the Commission that will mean increased funding for Italian agriculture in the bloc's next long-term budget. While the future of the interim trade deal remains up in the air, just this week in Strasbourg, the European Parliament adopted a series of measures designed to protect EU farmers from potential risks in the agreement. This suggests that the Parliament will not ultimately block it. Under the new rules, the Commission will have to consider taking protective measures if imports of so-called sensitive agricultural products, including poultry and beef, increase beyond a certain level, or if import prices undercut domestic prices by more than a set amount. Romanian EPP member Daniel Buda gives Radio Romania more information.
Farmers in Romania and throughout the European Union will be protected from the possibility of Mercosur products entering the market in volumes or at prices that would create difficulties. If the volumes entering the market increase by 5%, compared to the average over the last 3 years, these imports will be blocked. If prices deviate by more than 5% from the 3-year average, these imports will be blocked. And if these two clauses do not have the desired effect, we have €1 billion available to compensate farmers.
The Commission had actually pushed for a 10% tolerance, but the Parliament wasn't willing to agree to this. When the time comes, the Brussels executive will also be obliged to monitor the market and present a 6-monthly report to Parliament assessing the impact of agricultural imports. So we'll sign off there. Join us again next week for another trip around the Euranet Plus network.